Shalom, this is Yair Davidiy speaking from the land of Israel. We are continuing our study of the weekly portion, the weekly Torah portion that is read out in the synagogue. This week's portion is known as Mishpatim. Mishpatim translated as judgments. It deals mainly with a series of different laws that were given to the children of Israel in the wilderness shortly after they had received the Ten Commandments. And according to different understandings, these judgments emanate from the Ten Commandments. That is, the Ten Commandments were not only specific rulings, you shall not do this, you shall not do this, shall not do that, but they encompassed all of the subsidiary rulings that came after them. So this is what we have. We have these judgments. And according to one authority, Nachmanides said that these judgments applied to everyone to a certain degree. Strictly speaking, they only apply to the children of Israel, those children of Israel, that is the Jewish people in our time, who are still obligated by the law. But the principles behind them and the general knowledge of them is recommended, even to some degree obligatory, or called adjudicators, are called people who are involved with giving laws, with ruling a community, or also judging over themselves what they should do and they should not do. They should have a general knowledge of these laws and apply the basic principles that are encompassed by them. And apply the basic principles that are encompassed by them. So this is what we have. These judgments, Mishpatim. And one of the judgments concerns an Eved Ivri. An Eved Ivri is an indentured servant, a Hebrew servant. You had the concept in those times that a servant, a Hebrew, that is another Israelite, would work for 7 years to an appointed master, an appointed overseer, one could say. He would work for 7 years. All his needs would be taken care of. He had to be respected. He had to be treated reasonably well. He had to be looked after, and he had to work. And how did one get into this situation? If he had accrued debts that he could not pay, he could sell himself in order to pay off these debts for 7 years. Or if he was caught stealing or doing something else by the courts and he couldn't pay the fine that was imposed upon them, he would also be sold. And after 7 years he would be set free, and he had certain rights, certain obligations. And this is similar to the indentured servant that used to exist a few hundred years ago in the USA, in North America, before the USA became an independent country from Britain. It also existed in Britain, it existed throughout the world, that a person would, as if to say, sell his labour, become a servant of someone else for a certain period of time, and his rights would be limited, but at the end of that period he would go free. Now, in addition to the indentured servant, we also have the concept of an Eved Kanani, that is a permanent slave. A permanent slave was someone from another nation, someone who had been captured in war, or had been bought from other peoples. He was a non-Israelite, and he would be taken under the protection, under the control of the Israelite people, and he would belong to a master. And he was a slave. There's no doubt about it. He had certain rights. You could not mistreat him, and he had obligations, and he had to keep some of the minimum commandments, but not all of them, and he would be a slave forever. But if his master should let him free, in other words, letting a slave, an Eved Kanani, free was frowned upon. It was not encouraged. Strictly speaking, it was forbidden, but if it was done, would hold, the person would be free. And if he was free, he automatically became a full-fledged citizen. He had all the rights and obligations, so a non-Israelite, he would be exactly the same as them before the law. So this is what we have, and this is, they can talk about the moral situation, the moral rights, the moral principles behind this, whether it was justified, not justified, it's difficult to say. This was in a different age, a different situation. Some people say that the present system, we have a large portion of certain communities in jail for a good portion of their lives, and in jail, in incarceration as exists in America. They are subject to all kinds of negative influences, and they suffer. And that actually slavery, as it existed in ancient times, would have been more humane. But we don't know. We only know what we see, and we go with what we understand. So, and this is what existed in the past, and it's worth us studying it and knowing about it. The rights of foreign sojourners were protected. This is stressed in this section. This section of Mishpatim, it encompasses the chapters of Exodus 21, 22, 23, and 24, and it includes strong injunctions to look after the foreigners, and you must neither wrong a foreigner nor oppress him, for you were foreigners in the land of Egypt. You shall not afflict any widow or orphan. If you afflict them in any way and they cry out to me, I will surely hear their cry, and my anger will burn, and I will kill you with a sword, and your wives will become widows and your children fatherless. So God Almighty warns us not to take advantage of those who are vulnerable and to protect them. And he gives us moral injunctions throughout this section. Sorcery and witchcraft was strictly forbidden. Premarital sex without marriage was also forbidden. If a person seduced a virgin, he had to pay the equivalent of the marriage price, which was quite high, to a father, or to marry the girl. Depends upon the situation, but this was on the books. It was on the books, and how it was administered was up to the judges. This is what we had. We have a whole series of different injunctions and exhortations and rulings in this section. It says giving false witness was forbidden. You go to court, you have to tell the truth. You must keep away from a false report. You must not utter a false matter. Keep away from a false matter. You should not tell lies. You should not repeat things which are not true. And this is emphasized in this section. It also says we have to tell the truth. We have to acknowledge the truth when we come across it. Another thing was land, which was found in the land of Israel, that is not outside the land of Israel, but within the land of Israel itself. Every 7 years it had to lie fallow. You could not farm it. And actually we should perhaps return to these principles when we can. This should actually be the law in the land of Israel, and our religious farmers should try and keep this in this law, but many of them do not, and there are also legal ways to get around it if necessary. At all events, this is what we have. These laws are worth learning, knowing about, because the principles behind them are worth applying, and in some cases the very wording of these laws are still applicable to us and still obligatory upon us. We also had the principle that there was supposed to be 3 main feasts every year. Each year had 3 feasts, and on those feast days, 2 of them were 7 or 8 days each, and one of them was 1 day, actually one main day with the 7 subsidiary days behind it, so 3 times 3 weeks of the year at 3 different times. You had to go up to Jerusalem, up to the main place where the tabernacle was, which tabernacle is the same as the temple. In other words, go up to Jerusalem every mile and celebrate there. And there was also had economic and social implications, all this hullabaloo, all the things, all the rigmarole which was associated with this activity was important. Also, the Israelites were commanded when they're coming into the land to inherit it. They had to take it over. They had to drive out the foreign peoples, the pagan worshippers. They had to drive them out. And they were also exhorted not to go in the way of the pagan peoples who were coming in to conquer. Exodus 23, it says, indeed, I am sending an angel before you to guide you along the way and to bring you to the place which I have prepared. Be on guard before him and obey his voice. Do not provoke him, for he will not pardon your transgressions, for my name is in him. But if you diligently obey his voice and do all that I say, I will be an enemy to your enemies and an adversary to your adversaries. For my angel will go before you and bring you into the Amorites and the Hittites and the Perizzites and the Canaanites, the Hivites and the Jebusites, and I will completely destroy them. You should not bow down to their gods or serve them or do according to their practices, but you should utterly overthrow them and break down the images in pieces. shall serve the Lord your God, and he shall bless your bread and your water, and I will remove sickness from your midst. If you do what God tells you and what God wants of you, you will not be sick, you will be healthy. This is a promise. No one shall be miscarrying or be barren in your land. You shall have children, God willing, and the children will be healthy, and you too will be healthy, and I will fulfill the number of your days. You shall not die before your time. These are promises, and this is what God Almighty promises. We should learn the Bible and try and keep what God Almighty is speaking to us, telling us what to do through the Bible. And if we do that, then all will be well with us, and well with our children, and well with our neighbours, and well with our whole people. And it may not come about at once, but eventually it will. There will always be a reward for doing good. The Bible promises it, and people who have lived it and tried it have experienced it. It also says, I will send my fear before you. That is in Exodus 23:27. And I will throw into panic all the people with whom you shall come. And I will break all your enemies, turn their backs to you. I will send hornets before you, which will drive out the Hivite, the Canaanite, and the Hittite from before you. I will not drive them out before you in 1 year, lest the land can become desolate, and the beasts of the field multiply against you. Little by little I will drive them out before you, till you become fruitful and inherit the land. So it's God promises the Israelites when they come into the land, it would send hornets, that is little wasp-like creatures that would bite the people and drive them out. So Ibn Ezra, a famous commentator, he explained that the word for hornets is the same word for leprosy, and it was actually disease-bearing insects that would go before you and bring about a disaster upon the inhabitants of the land, who were your enemies, and they would be driven out because of this. And so this is apparently what did happen to some degree before the Israelites came into the land of Canaan, into the land that they were about to conquer. This holy land stretched from the Nile to the Euphrates. It was a very big area. See Exodus 23:31. I will set your boundaries from the Red Sea to the Sea of the Philistines, and from the desert to the river. I will deliver the inhabitants of the land into your hand, and I will drive them out before you. You must not make a covenant with them or with their gods. They shall not live in your land, lest they cause you to sin against me. For if you serve their gods, it will surely be a snare to you. In other words, do not let foreigners live in your land. Do not let people who worship other gods than you, who have a different customs to you or against you, do not let them dwell within you. And perhaps the people in North America should take heed of this warning. And so too should the people in Israel also know what is being said unto them, and follow it through as God wanted them to do so. So that is what our passage, our portion talks about. This is what we are being told. Towards the end of it, we're told that Moses went up to the mountain of Sinai, and there he received more laws, and he was there for 40 days and for 40 nights. May the Lord God of Israel bless you. Thank you.